Doesn't work. Hello everybody, welcome back to Business Blaze. In this one today, are free-range eggs actually all they're cracked up to be? Very clever title. This was written by Danny. Thank you, Danny, for putting it together, and let's jump in. I'm sure that shopping for eggs never used to be as complicated as this. Walking down the dairy aisle today, you're immediately assaulted with an onslaught of different egg labels, most of which seem determined to convince you that the eggs inside these cartons were produced by the happiest birds that ever roamed the earth. Free-range eggs, organic eggs, cage-free eggs, humane choice eggs, pasture-raised eggs, happy eggs, rolling around on the floor in hysterical laughter eggs. It's all there. I like no free-range and organic. I don't know any of these other ones. Like, is humane choice really a type of egg? But what do terms like free-range and organic really mean? In my mind, and let's just say at the beginning of this video, I'm thinking that free range means they get to roam around outside. Organic means they only eat organic stuff. Maybe, not entirely sure. I'm probably ready to be proven wrong. Most of us haven't got any personal grudges against chicken, and we instinctively like the idea of bird-kind products. I do. But when I see the price of, like, I will go free range, I will buy the free range eggs, because I'm like, oh, it's nice that they go around outside. I don't really care what they eat. That doesn't matter to me. I like the idea of them ranging around and it's not that much more expensive. But then you get the really expensive eggs, like probably these like humane choice eggs where they're like living in the forests and eating like only magical oats or whatever. That is expensive. Some of us might like to believe that free-range eggs are produced by completely carefree chickens pleasantly mooching about the countryside as they soak up the natural splendor of being alive. That's what I like to think, but I know that's not what's happening. A lot of the pastoral packaging of free-range eggs tends to convey this sunny impression. More cynical folk might suggest that it's all just a marketing con to reassure customers that they're being nice to animals when, in fact, most of the world's eggs are produced by chickens and hens still living in utterly savage and barbaric conditions. The truth of the matter is a little bit more complicated, and much depends on whereabout in the world you live. I'm just gonna go ahead and guess here that in Europe it's a little bit better than the US. I read a book a few years ago, I can't remember what it was called, but it was just talking about how animals kind of, it's pretty like if I was a chicken, they were like, do you want to live in the US or the European Union? I'd be like, European Union, please. America's scary for animals. And that absolutely just earned me a few dislikes. But before we drill down to the details, let's just get a few pretty basic points out of the way. With billions of eggs getting hatched every year around the world, it's reasonable to assume that this sort of mass production couldn't ever be achieved without disrupting the lives and the comfort of a great deal of chickens. It's not really super surprising. It's unlikely that the majority of birds are ever going to be destined for an idyllic, easy ride in the industry. However, the world seems to generally be moving in a kind of direction and away from the battery chicken-starved production in which thousands of birds are cramped together in appalling conditions under which they don't even have enough room to spread their wings. It'd be like, can you imagine being a chicken? You're in a cage and you're like, oh man, this sucks. I got these wings, but this cage is in the way. I can't ever use them. And then they'll be like, okay, great, go outside. Like, now you're a free-range chicken. You're like, finally, I can fly. Doesn't work. Record chicken flight was like 13 seconds. But of course, this still goes on in many countries, battery-style chickens that is, and we're moving at a far slower pace than many would like. Sadly, America is lagging behind compared to most of the Western world. That book was right. But before we move into the States, let's take a quick look at the European Union's definition of free-range eggs. I hope it's just that they get to roam around. That's what I'm looking for. The good news is that it does mean something of genuine value, and EU countries can't get away with sticking a small window in a congested barn and then legally labeling their eggs as free-range. The EU marketing legislation states that free-range hens must have continuous daytime access to open-air runs which are largely covered with vegetation. That sounds really quite nice. That does kind of sound like the pictures. I mean, I'm sure there's like a million of them together and they're like bumping into each other, but it does sound pretty nice. The maximum stocking density of these outdoor runs is about 2,500 birds per hectare. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure on the units of measurement, but I'm reliably informed, maybe by Google, that a hectare is 10,000 square meters. It's a bit bigger than a football pitch, and it's about the same size as an international rugby union field. Wonderful. I have no idea how big it is. I used to play rugby as a kid. I mean, I was absolutely forced to do it. They weren't like, hey Simon, you want to play rugby? I'm like, no. Well, like, you're 13. You got to go out in the cold and play rugby. sucked. So I do know how big that is, but a football field. It's as big as a football field. I think a soccer pitch for you Americans is about the same as an American football pitch, I hope. Who cares? 2,500 birds may sound like a lot, but they do get quite a bit of room to move around and freely roam and strut their stuff. It's certainly a vast improvement on being shoved into an overcrowded cage for the whole of their natural lives. The EU legislation also stipulates that free-range hens should be provided with nest boxes, adequate perches, and plenty of litter for scratching and dust bathing. What is dust? Dust bathing, also called sand bathing, is an animal behavior characterized by rolling or moving around in the dust or earth or sand with the likely purpose of removing parasites from the fur, feathers, or skin. It's a maintenance behavior. It's kind of like we take a bath, except we do it, like people. In water. You imagine it was like, yeah, there's a big water shortage, we're just gonna have to bathe in sand. So it sounds like a good deal for the birds. Well, it's certainly better than most, but it's certainly not quite chicken paradise. We all know that hens have a natural pecking order, which is usually determined by, well, pecking at each other. That's where it comes from. This is fine in smaller groups, but when 2,500 birds are constantly pecking each other to bits, it can obviously develop into a serious problem. I also believe, and I'm just gonna check this, that chickens go crazy for the sight of blood. That might just be an urban legend, so let's just look it up. Most chickens are opportunistic in their cannibalism. Oh my. They only attack when they see another chicken is bleeding. They go after that chicken. This is what comes up. They've made special glasses for chickens so they don't attack each other when they see blood. That is weird. Yeah, so I mean, if they peck at each other, it's a bit of a problem because they might cause one to bleed and then all the chickens are like, F it, we'll eat him. The unfortunate solution to this is to trim the beaks of the birds, a painful procedure usually carried out without any anesthetic. Beak trimming or debeaking is already banned in Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, and the Australian Capital Territory. Okay. Is that just regular Australia? And it's currently being phased out in Germany. So it's everywhere else. But it's a procedure which is still deemed perfectly acceptable for the production of free-range eggs in most EU countries. The EU definition of organic eggs is a slight step up from free-range eggs, although it largely relates to the diet of the birds. Okay, I was kind of right. Like I guessed right. Organic, and I spoiled the whole of Danny's wonderful script. Organic hens tend to get a few extra perks thrown into the deal, such as increased perch space and a bigger indoor area. But here's where the definitions sometimes get lost in translation, as free-range and organic have slightly different meanings in America. The United States Department of Agriculture states that free-range birds only need to have access to the outdoors, but there are no regulations in place as to the quality or size of the outdoor area, nor even the duration of the time that the hen should have access. Like, if I'm the head of a corporation, and I'm like, we gotta make as much money as possible, because that's what companies do. They're not ethical, they're not alive, they're just designed to chase profits. It'd be like, so how do we do this? Well, what we'll do is we'll put a tiny little space where they can go outside, and then we'll let like 1 million of them fight over getting out there. Free range, baby! So in other words, if an American chicken is given 10 seconds a day to strut around on a few inches of concrete, but then spends the rest of the day restricted to a busy barn, its eggs can legally be sold as free range in the United States. The wording may not sound a million miles away from the EU legislation, but the outcome makes for a world of difference. However, the US version of organic eggs is perhaps a little closer to the EU definition of free range eggs. The USDA requirements for organic eggs are that the chickens must be fed only organic feed and that only natural molting is allowed to occur. Unlike in most commercial operations, molting is artificially induced to extend the productivity of laying chickens. Perhaps most significantly, though, organic hens must have access to a proper outdoor area, such as a pen or an enclosed yard. Unlike US free-range hens, which could just have access to a tiny patch of cement. Okay, so essentially the guy I made up who was head of that corporation being like, yeah, we'll just give them a little patch. That's actually what happens. Again, you're a chicken. Where do you want to live? So in America, it has to be stated that free-range eggs are more of a marketing ploy than in Europe, where the term does at least carry some weight. But it could also be argued that there's simply less customer demand for free-range eggs in the US. Around 44% of eggs produced in the UK are free-range compared to about 5% in America. People are price-driven. How can we get more for our money? So where does this leave us when we're next scratching our heads in the dairy aisle? Well, labels such as cage-free and barn roaming and happy eggs don't really mean a great deal anywhere in the world, other than the birds are confined to an overcrowded barn instead of an overcrowded cage. Yeah, happy eggs just sounds like marketing. Like, yeah, well, we've got the birds, they're in a cage. They can't even interact with other birds. They just out eggs. What should we call them? Happy eggs. Happy eggs. Happy because we're making loads of money. Free range is close to worthless in America, but is of a bit more value in Europe, where birds genuinely have more freedom, but depending on your country may also be subjected to questionable procedures like the beak chopping thing. Organic eggs are generally your kindest choice across the world, but it has to be said that they come with the most expensive price tag due to the higher costs involved in organic production. One slice of advice is to familiarize yourself with any other official certifications or labeling specific to your country. For example, any carton of organic eggs in the UK, stamped with Soil Association, confirms that as well as meeting the EU standards for organic egg production, the chickens are also kept in smaller flocks with no painful beak trimming procedures. So Soil Association eggs are the kindest commercial eggs you can buy in the UK without a doubt, and yes, they're probably the most expensive. It gets crazy. They get really expensive. And like, not just for eggs, but chickens. Like, the difference in price between like a cheap chicken of what, £3 and an expensive one of like 14. It's wild. And I do feel this is something that the population is generally more concerned with when the economy is really good. Like in a recession, I feel there's a lot less demand for like 14-pound chickens or like 5-pound 6 packs of eggs. But whatever the labeling, if you're really bothered about the welfare of chickens, your best bet is to not support the commercial industry and stop buying them from your supermarket. The birds are always destined to go through some form of ordeal, and they'll always be pushed to exhaustion and shorter lifespans by laying a lot of eggs than they normally ever would in the wild. But if you really can't stop yourself from buying commercial eggs, try to go organic and check your local certification and labeling, or just buy chocolate eggs, they're nicer anyway, but ideally organic chocolate eggs. Thank you, Danny. No bonus facts today. Sorry, guys. Thank you, Danny, for putting this one together. Appreciate it. This was interesting. I kind of feel that this really sums it up really nicely. If you're feeling ethical, buy your organic eggs. If you can't afford the organic eggs, it's okay. I buy the free-range ones, I don't buy the organic ones. I'm somewhere in the middle of doing the right thing. This has been Business Blaze. Suggestions below, please smash that like button if you enjoyed this video. Subscribe, why not? And I'll see you next time.